the cause of suffering
Mm.
is the attachment to something.
Yes,
So you were attached to your identity as a
of course.
professional hockey player.
Absolutely.
And when that was taken away from you, you suffered. You went to a dark tunnel, right?
Absolutely. I sure did. And I'll tell you something, David, that applies to the business world maybe as much, if not more, than athletes.
Welcome to the Break Free Podcast. I am your host, David Mansilla, and it's a pleasure to be here. We have with us a person that is silently changing the world with this incredible idea how to transform how we help people that are in need. It is a privilege and an honor to have Steve with us. Hello, Steve. How are you?
Hey, David, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Nice to see you again.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, for some context, can you tell me your full name? Where do you live, and what do you do for a living?
Yeah, so my name is Stephen or Steve Clarke, and I live in Toronto. I have places in the States as well, but Toronto is my home. And my company is called RTG Group USA Inc. It's a for-profit social enterprise. Under that umbrella, we own seven other companies that some might have heard of. Purpose-driven. They're all purpose-driven, purpose-driven travel, purpose-driven artists, those type of companies. And yeah, our model and our business is all about making a positive impact in the world through creative business strategies that we've created.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
And I know that it has taken a lifetime for you to get where you are and to open your heart the way you have it. Because I don't know, but when people see this podcast, especially in YouTube, they're going to feel your love just by seeing your beautiful face.
Thank you.
But let's go back in time and figure out how you arrived here. So, this podcast, as you know, is about inspiring people to live the life that you are living, the life that I am living. And this it takes a while. And so that what we try to do is have shortcuts for people so they don't have to go through the same problems that you and I went through to get where
Right.
we are.
Yeah,
Right?
no, it's great, and I applaud you for what you're doing. I think that one of the real things for me that I learned over time, I grew up, poor. We didn't have too much money, but for whatever reason, I was a gifted athlete and ended up becoming a professional hockey player until for 5 years before I got hurt and got into advertising, which was a blessing for me, a great industry. I learned so much, and I've been able to take everything I learned from there and apply it to what I'm doing today. But I was always taught, David, that the formula for success, and I think all of your listeners need to understand this, is a consistent effort over time. And it's that simple. People say, "Well, it can't be that simple." It is that simple. Consistent effort over time. Keep doing something on a daily basis. The only unknown in that equation is time, and some can do it quicker than others. But the thing to remember is that that's what it is. So be consistent in your efforts, keep doing it over and over, and you'll become successful.
It's beautiful and it's simple. But let's go back in time because I know there is a lot of young people that listen to this podcast and some of them will love to become a professional hockey player. So how did that happen? Like where were you in your life when you got attracted to playing hockey?
So I was, David, I was born into it. I was young as a lot of Canadian, young kids. I started playing, I started skating when I was like two. And, I just had a passion for it. I just loved it. And I couldn't get enough of it. I was on the ice all the time. And as I grew and, started to hone those skills, I had some really good help along the way with good coaches and things like that. And again, for who knows why, it was certainly work I had to put into it. But for me, as a young kid, that wasn't work, right? I mean, it was like so much fun. It's like Wayne Gretzky was always the first guy on the ice at practice and the last guy to leave. And if when you ask him if like, did you do that because you were honing your skills to become a professional and everything, he'll tell you right away, I did it because I loved it. I couldn't, my dad had to drag me off. So that's what happens, and that's what happened to me. And I just really fell in love with the whole idea of playing and competitiveness, and that just grew as I grew. And I played junior hockey, of course, and then from there got drafted and and ended up playing professional. And so there was a lot of work in there in between, but I was consistent, just like the formula says. Every
Yeah.
day I was out there doing my thing. And in the summer when I couldn't, I was out there practicing my shots and playing ball hockey and doing all those other things. So, yeah.
That's beautiful. So which team drafted you? Like who did you play for?
So I ended up getting drafted, and we won't talk about the team because I didn't want to go there, so we won't give them any rub. But I ended up I did not want to play there, so I ended up going down to the States on a scholarship. The hockey wasn't very good there at the time, so through connections I had, I was able to sign my first professional hockey contract in Sweden. And I went over to Sweden to play. And when I was young, David, the Swedish players coming to Canada and the United States to play were exceptional hockey players. So I knew by going over there that I was going to improve. I knew that I was going to be playing against NHL caliber, and so that's what I ended up doing. I ended up signing a contract there, and I loved it. I fell in love with the country, the people, and the hockey was exceptional. In fact, in the third year that I was there, Vancouver Canucks, who I ended up signing with, they came over and offered me a contract, and it wasn't a very good one because I wasn't quite the level that I was going to be, and we turned it down. I had an agent. We said no, he's going to stay here for now. And so that was kind of interesting. And I know listeners out there, especially Canadian guys, will say you turned down an opportunity to sign, with an NHL team. And yes, I did actually, and I'm glad I did because the next year I got a much better one. And unfortunately, that year that I did sign, I stayed. You play out your year, and I got hurt pretty badly. Had some surgeries and everything, but that was the end of that. And it was just like that. That's what happens in sports. You just all of a sudden you're there, and the next day, after several surgeries, they say you can never play again.
Right.
And that's what happened to me.
And it happens a lot to pro athletes, right?
People have no idea how often it happens because it happens a lot of times, like maybe right before somebody was going to sign or in the junior or whatever. It's a tough sport. It's a real tough sport. In fact, most athletes, I have a lot of friends from the NFL, from the NBA, and football is a tough sport and everything. All of them will say nothing compares to hockey. You guys skate around at such speeds, and you've got sticks, and just absolutely hammer each other. And of course, we can fight, which
Yeah.
they're just in awe of, that we can actually drop our gloves and beat the hell out of each other.
I know it's crazy.
It is crazy, and I tell you all the time, especially my NBA friends, when I'm there and we're together, whatever, that's all they want to do. All they want to do is hear the stories of the fights that I was in over the years. That's the big thing, right? And so it's always fun. But yeah, it's a tough sport, and it's really tough on the especially lower body. You're always getting hit, low and the knees and everything. So yeah, a lot of guys don't make it even as far as I did, even though it was that brief. But yeah, it's a tough sport.
Yeah, hockey is almost like modern day gladiators, isn't
It's
it?
pretty close to it. It's and some of the other guys, as I was saying, they say you're skating around with basically knives on your feet and clubs in your hand. I mean, what kind of a sport is that? And they say, well, it takes a little bit more than that. There's a little finesse and everything to the game, but yeah, it's a real tough sport, and longevity. That's why the players who play years, I'm always in awe of. They're like, he played 13 years or 15 years or whatever. It's like, whoa. I mean, that takes so much out of your body. And so you got to kind of tip your hand to them.
How was your transition between being a professional player into actually the business world? Because a
Yeah.
lot of players they end up going bankrupt, and it's hard for them to recover, right?
Yeah. You know what? For me, David, it was a very, very difficult time, a very, very dark time. Because I obviously I thought I had many more years. I thought I was going to be a superstar, and it was just taken away just like that. And you're not really conditioned for that. You're not really taught that it can just happen like that. I mean, you see it happen to guys, but at 25, you're like immortal, right? It's not going to happen to me. But it does. And so it was very, very difficult time. I was very fortunate that I got the opportunity and the introduction into the advertising world when I did very closely after. And and I also was fortunate that the mind that I had, the mindset that I had, even though it was crushed at the time, but it was still strong enough to, say, okay, well, and it actually happened with the mentor that I had in hockey, and he was a great guy, and he said to me, "So that chapter's over. What's going to be the next one?" And that was like, he doesn't even know, but it was like, what? What did he just say? I mean, so yeah, this is like life is like a book. That chapter's over. It's time to write a new chapter. And that stayed with me my entire life. And I teach it. I actually mentor some young kids today, and I say, you're writing a chapter right now, and you're the author. And that's what happened to me. And so I came out of it right away, got into advertising, really loved it, and then built up my own company, which I built up quite large, and sold it. But yeah, it was a difficult time. That transition's very difficult, from being almost like everybody's autographs and you're this and that, and then all of a sudden, like, nobody knows who you are. It's like, what happened? Where's all the fans? So yeah, a lot of guys struggle with that.
You know, what you just what you just mentioned, I learned this week actually.
Oh.
The cause of suffering
Mm.
is the attachment to something.
Yes.
So you were attached to your identity as a
Of course.
professional hockey player,
Absolutely.
and when that was taken away from you, you suffered. You went to a dark tunnel, right?
Absolutely. I sure did. And I'll tell you something, David, that applies to the business world maybe as much, if not more, than athletes. And I've seen that over the last number of years, where people who were very big in the corporate world, executive vice president or CEO or whatever, and then they left or they retired or whatever, they struggle for their identity. They don't know who they are. And that's a real different, a lot for a lot of them to transition into a normal life, so to speak.
It's crazy, and
Yeah,
but it's a huge lesson to learn.
it
It
is.
happened to me, right? It happened to me to the point when I was almost bankrupt. I was almost bankrupt in my business 4 times, but the first time I felt a sense of loss, like I was dying, because I was attaching my sense of identity with my business.
Yeah, exactly.
How
Yeah,
crazy is that, right?
yeah.
And that
No,
was
we
the
do it.
suffering comes
Yeah,
from that, right?
for sure. It sure does. And you're absolutely right. I mean, we've all been there, especially business owners. I mean, it's up and down. We know that. And yeah, and that's why, if people can, if I could, anybody out there listening right now, just remember that life is like a book, and they're all chapters, and sometimes you have to close that chapter and move on to the next. But don't get upset with it. Get excited about now what am I going to build in this new chapter, right? I think that's what keeps me excited about what I'm doing right now, because not only is this a chapter, but it's broken down into sub chapters, where this chapter is all about making a positive impact, but I'm doing it in so many different ways that it just keeps me going, and I'm so excited about what we're doing.
It's beautiful. I can see the excitement and the passion in your eyes,
Yeah,
by the way.
it's there.
So, how do you come out with an idea for your business? Like, how do you start your first business?
So I knew that. So for me, my first real business as an adult, we'll say, was after I got into advertising, and I kind of was there for 4 years. I realized I could see. I don't know how, but I was even a strategist then, and before I really became a strategist. And I could see that the industry for me, and the company I worked for was a huge company with big clients, and I could see the problems that they were creating for themselves and sometimes for their clients. And I could see a void. And right away, I even mentioned it to the CEO, who was actually became a friend of mine because he was a hockey fan. That's actually how I originally got the job. And we would talk about that. And he's like, yeah, I know what you're saying. And it's true, but that's not what we do. We just do it here and here. And I thought to myself, well, that's an opportunity that for me to open up mine and make sure that I do all of that. So it's a consistent message and everything else. And that's really how I started the first one and saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get clients. And then the reality, what happened, David, was even bigger. I ended up going 3 months into that to a conference and listened to this guy speak, who was talking about the end of advertising and the end of marketing as we know it. And as I was listening to him, it made so much sense. He was talking about now like sales and marketing being one, right? Which it is today, obviously. So, but back then, this was it was like they were still talking about how many impressions that you got in a commercial or whatever. Which who cares? It's how much product you sell, right? But that back then
Exactly.
they weren't talking about that, right? And so, when I was listening to Sergio Zyman was his name, and well known for kind of breaking through with this concept. And I thought, wow, so in my business, when I came back from, it was in New York, I came back to Toronto, and I said, I'm going to create my business, which was only 3 months old. It's going to be all about, if it doesn't sell product, ... don't do it. And that was a novel concept at the time. It's like, what are you talking about? We want awareness and everything. It's like, no, you want to sell product. And you want to, yes, of course, boost your awareness, but at the same time, you want to make sure you're selling product. And that was a novel approach. And so that's how I really broke in, and how we were able to grow it as big as we did.
How big did you get?
We got pretty big, and numbers can't be released, but we got pretty big. And and it was it was bigger, way bigger than I ever imagined, quite frankly. And then, I was at Saatchi for, 3.5 years, transitioning and doing all that stuff. And Saatchi's a $12 billion giant. And so that was a lot of fun, great brand, great clients. And I got to work with Procter and Gamble and Toyota and, some really great brands that they represent. And then it was just time to take a break and decide what the next, in fact, I was even saying that what's going to be the next chapter? I don't know what it's going to be. And so we moved to Scottsdale. We kicked that around a bit and said, you know what, it's got to be about making a positive impact on the world. That's, my wife and I said, listen, this is it. This is what we're going to do. We've got the opportunity. We've got the means, and we've been blessed. So let's give back. And that's where we are today.
Okay, so this is what your life gets super interesting for me. Let's dive deep. How do you come up with so let's describe the idea because it's revolutionary. You are disrupting the way people help other people, right? How do you come up with the idea? How do you start implementing?
So here's the thing for me, and I'm going to tell you because and it's going to sound really strange, and I hope it doesn't come off bad to your listeners, but I really don't know. Sometimes I come up with these ideas and I'm thinking, whoa, wow, that could really work. But in this case, what happened was my wife and I traveled around a little bit, kind of searching for what we wanted to do. We didn't know what it was. And when we came back to Toronto, it was like, okay, so by that time I'm considering myself an advertising guy. I spent a lot of time in that field. So I need data. I need information. And so we partnered up with Google, knew a lot of people there still do, and they started sending us over information. So we weren't sure at all what it was going to be. We just knew, and that was the thing. It wasn't like, end homelessness, end hunger, it was nothing like that. It was, we want to make the biggest positive impact that we could make. But as I was getting this data, I started to get angry. I was literally getting angry. You never want to get a professional hockey player angry, by the way, because you know what happens, right? So I was getting angry, and I was looking at these numbers. I was calling them. I'm saying, this says 47 million people. Remember, this is 6 years ago. 47 million people go hungry every day in Canada, the United States, and 12 million of them are kids. That can't be right. They're like, yeah, that's right. What? How come I don't know this? I've been on boards of charities and everything. How come nobody's telling me that stuff? So I was getting angry. And then I started realizing that, for example, last year, I think it was, we gave 471 billion US dollars to charities and nonprofits in Canada, the United States alone. Yeah. And
Can you
every year
repeat
we
that
give
number, please?
So last year, I'll just tell you the average. We averaged 450 billion US dollars every year to charities and nonprofits in Canada and the United States.
Wow.
Now, here's what I was thinking 6 years ago, which now it's even worse. What causes are going down? Are there less homeless? No. Less hungry? No. Is the climate improving? No. So
where is the money going?
That's what I was saying to myself. And here's I want to also say this to all your listeners. I think the charities have great intentions, but the reality now, we don't have to debate it. This is no longer an opinion. You have all the data to back it up. The charity model is broken. They need to change it. I don't know how they're going to do it. It's been 100-year-old model, but it's broken. It's just not solving the problem. So we need a new model. This is what I was saying to myself 6 years ago, David. And that's how I sat down as a strategist. And I've been, doing business models for major companies now for, 20 years. I said, I need to create a new model. And it all started with this 3 things. I said, this model that I'm going to create right now has got to have transparency. We got all the data. We knew these young kids coming up. They weren't asking for transparency anymore. They were demanding it. Transparency had to happen. The second thing was sustainability. Now, if you want anything sustainable, just make sure that everybody wins more than they put in. And these young kids were saying to us, David, what's in this for me? And you're like, well, we're doing good. Yeah, but what's anything else in this for me? Nothing wrong with that. I wanted to create sustainability. And the third one, which was really the revolutionary thing, is collaboration. David, you and I, our entire life have heard we're stronger together. We're stronger together. Of course we're stronger together. 2 guys versus 1, of course we're going to be stronger. But the whole space, the giving space right now is totally against that. And it's not their fault. They're all fighting for the same grants and the same donors, but they're individuals. And so they don't come together. They don't collaborate. So I wanted to build a model with those 3 things. And that's exactly what we built. And the only reason we used hunger was because of those original numbers I told you, which, by the way, 47, today it's 53 million people in Canada, United States, and 17 million of those are children. So it's gotten even that much worse. So that's how we built this model. We said we need a product. We need to be a for-profit social enterprise. And by the way, that's now starting to come in. You're seeing more and more companies. And the reason we do that, say, well, why aren't you a nonprofit or charity? Because we need to do those 3 things. We need full transparency. And we also need to be able to when we make a profit, we need to do whatever we need to do with it. We don't need to have all those other rules and regulations. Yeah. And so that's how we built our model. We built it with those 3 things, and we built it based on starting using food as our product. And that's how we're running right now.
It's wonderful because once you make it for profit, you get rid of all the red tape, all the bureaucracy, and it's for profit. Exactly. You're running a legitimate business that happens to bless the world, right?
Exactly. You know what? You're right on. And I think as I said, you're seeing more and more of them. Our friends down in Florida, who we're partnered with on a couple of projects, 4 Oceans, great company, for profit, more and more of them are jumping up.
And isn't that the foundation of democracy and capitalism anyway?
It sure is.
And you think about that?
Yeah. And absolutely, David. And I think you're going to see more and more and more. And, as long as anybody out there that's thinking about it, just keep those 3 things that I said in mind: transparency, sustainability, and collaboration. And if you can do those 3 things and ensure that everybody wins more than they put in, you're gonna build a successful business for sure.
Everybody wins. Now, how can you go into details on how you are actually implementing this model?
Yeah, so the model is pretty simple on the outset. I mean, we formulated a very healthy food, we manufacture that, and we sell it. Now, strategically, how we sell it is kind of cool because we have 7 different companies that are all tapped into individual communities, and those are all companies that that are either launched or are about to launch or have already launched. So they go out, and through that model, they sell food. So the real simple formula for your listeners is, David, I would say, David, I'd like you to feed a Canadian. It's going to cost you $39.70. You're going to buy 30 meals from me, of which I'm going to take them in your name, and I'm going to ship them to a charity partner that's going to distribute them and put them in the hands of the people who need them. And you're going to have transparency, because that charity is going to send you a note saying, thank you, David, we received the food. It's going directly into the hands of children. So we want you to know that. So, now we said to the young kids, what are you giving to the charity? Well, we're giving food. Great. What percentage of that's going back to the people who need it? Well, obviously 100%. So we do that. Then we created the sustainability, again, because we're for profit. We say to you, David, we want you to do this forever. And to make sure you do, here's our discount mobile app. It's got 310,000 vendors in Canada, the United States, that from travel, restaurants, bars, hotels, electronics, clothing, they'll all give you a minimum of 15% off every time you use it. So there's no way you're not going to save more than it costs you to feed that child. So of course you're going to keep, even the kids in our focus groups are saying, why would we stop? So we had sustainability. So that's the model. So we don't call them donors, we call them subscribers. They're winning more than they put in. But the food's going to the children. The charities are happy with that because they're getting free food. And they're also, because we're shipping the list of the 10,000 people who are buying, that's going to boost their list as well. So they're happy about all that. So everybody wins on that model. But, and this will be a good one for your listeners, that's not the real fun part or strategic part. That's just the model. Now the fun starts. So I'll give you a perfect example. We took a group of a charity that there's about 200 of these. We sat them down. We actually did it online. And we said, okay, you guys are raising money for this charity. And I won't name the charity because we did it. And we did it with the permission of the CEO, but we'll tell you what happened. There was 200 of them. And we said, okay, so we told them exactly what we just told you. Like, okay, cool. And each one of them was charged or asked, obviously, to raise $12,000 a year for their charity. And it was a good cause, and most of them had that particular illness. So it was like, yeah, this is what they did. So about 30% of them were actually hitting the goal, David, because it's not easy going out and, begging for money. That's what they do. And so I said to them, what about this model? And I told them exactly what I just told you. So what do you think about that? And they're all like, whoa, wow, you got the app, you got the transparency. Whoa, that would be really cool. So I said, how many of you could feed 500 kids through our model? They're like, well, yeah, we could. But 90% of them said, yeah, we could do it for sure. Like, but we're not going to do it because, we raised money for this charity. So I said, but you could do it. Oh, yeah, it'd be way easier than what we're doing now. We said, great, because if you did it, you know what would happen? And like, what would happen? I would take $2 off of every person fed, which is $1,000 a month or $12,000 a year, and I'd send that back to your charity. And right away they're like, "What? You can't do that." Yes, I can. I'm a for-profit social enterprise. I can do that. And so they're like, well, "This is great." Well, right away we said to them, "No, it's not. It's good." And they're like, "Why isn't it great?" Because we have a motto that everybody must win more than they put in. They're like, "Yeah. What about you?" They're like, "Oh, no, we're volunteers. Like, we do this." No, not in my model, you don't. So I'm going to take 50 cents, which is $250 a month, $3,000 a year, and I'm going to put that in the travel account for each and every one of you. And they went nuts. They're like, what? Yeah. Even the CEO of that charity said to me afterwards, he said, you know what? I still don't even believe it, that I can actually have my volunteers be feeding kids and make more money for my charity, and they get rewarded. Like I never thought this was possible. So that's our model. And what we do is we build these companies. That particular company is called Purpose Driven Travel, purposedriventravel.net. So that's a company.
I understand now.
Exactly. So now we have, so for example, then my friends call me from Europe. I was there for years. and they're artists, and they're like, well, what are you going to do about the artists? Now you can go on the website and check out Purpose-Driven Artists, where we're doing something similar, but the give back is to buy art from artists all over the world, and the people are participating, are in a draw to win free art, and everybody wins again more than they put in. We could tap into any community. We've got a new vegan company. The vegans came to us and told me my food was vegan. I'm not a vegan, so I really didn't know. But they're saying, yeah, so you're giving food, vegan food, to these kids. So we want to help you get more. So I said, great, like help us feed 1 million kids, and we'll put that $2 back into vegan companies, and we'll fund them. We get 2 million a month. How about that? They're like, whoa. So we can tap into any community we want and say, this is how we're going to help.
And me, for example, as a corporation, I would love that model because the transparency, I know where the money is coming, where the money is going, right? And everybody wins. And by the way, the companies that are giving the discount to the businesses that are giving the money, they're also making money because they're selling the products and services in the app, right?
Exactly. And you know what? With them, David, people say, how do you get so many people in the app? What are you doing? That's a marketing fee for them. I mean, that's how they do their marketing. And the more people obviously we have on that app, we're actually transitioning our current app over to a global app in the next 2 years. And that will be global companies from all over the world. So when you'll be feeding in Canada or the United States, and you could go down to Mexico, or you could go over to Spain, or you can look at that app, and there's going to be all these vendors on there that will give you a discount because you're feeding somebody in Canada.
like Steve, just imagine if these numbers are so horrible for the two most rich countries in the world, what would it be for Latin America, for Asia, right? For Eastern Europe?
Unbelievable. In fact, I was just talking to yesterday. We're rolling this model out in Brazil. You should see the numbers in Brazil. Staggering. Brazil never was over that threshold of 5% for homeless for hunger. They're now just over 10. Wow. Never ever 10% of the population. I mean, that for Brazil, somebody like Brazil, I mean, they're like, what? This can't happen. Well, it is. And so they love our model, and we're implementing something down there with a couple of lawyers that want to implement it. So yeah, it's everywhere right now. And the United States, by the way, is probably the worst I've ever seen it. And I've been living and working down there for 25, 30 years. I've never seen it like this before, ever, with the homelessness and the hunger issues. I mean, it's really, really bad. And unfortunately, there's no real great solutions to it, David. And so that's why I'm loving what we're doing, because we can, again, collaboration, sustainability. When we build a project, as we're doing now in LA with the Olympic Committee and other partners we're working with down there, in the next 5-6 years, there will be no homeless people in LA, and there will be no people going hungry. And when the LA Olympics roll out, they can showcase the city as someone who's made the transition, who solved the problem, and everybody is, again, winning more than they put in.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's exciting.
You're a genius.
I'm not a genius. I'm just a guy who's got a passion, and honest to God, David, I just, for whatever, again, same with athletic ability, for whatever, God blessed me with a strategic mind, and I'm able to come up with these things, look at these problems. In fact, I was talking to a fellow faith-based fellow yesterday, and he said, well, if you're so strategic, like, what can we do for the churches? And I came up with a program for him for the churches. And he said to me, do you have this in writing? I said, I don't have it in writing. I just came up with it. So he said, can you put this in writing? That's what he did too. He started laughing. He said, wow. He said, can you put this in writing for me and put like a pitch deck together and everything? He said, I could probably get thousands of churches that want to do this model. Mm-hmm. And they'll be sustainable, and they'll actually help their parishioners, because their parishioners will invest small amounts, get a return. He wants to do 10% on their money, and we use that to feed kids, and the money goes back to the churches. It's sustainable. Everybody wins. He's like, this is unbelievable. I said, yeah, then the churches will help us end hunger in North America, which I think that's pretty good. No? Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we can do it with anything. It's really cool. Yeah.
So cool. Imagine churchgoers, instead of them supporting the church, they're actually feeding people.
Yes.
And by doing that, the church is sustainable.
And when the church, like my church, for example, has come to me many times, the roof needs fixing, we need a new heater, and just like, you're writing checks for thousands of dollars. Now that won't happen because now they'll be completely sustainable. One thing we just did, this is one great story. A lady called me and she's really focused on domestic violence, and she's accountant, really good with money, but she really has a passion for this. She lived it and she wants to really do a difference. So she put a really great model together how to do that, and she was able to get $2 million. But she realized no matter how she looked at this, David, that $2 million was going to be gone in 12 to 16 months. So what did she have to do? Keep freaking going out and begging for money or getting new investors, and was she going to pay them back? So she'd heard about me and she called me and said, like, what would you do? And this is the one I love the most, this case study, because this will literally change. Now, any cause can come to us based on this. I said to her, you're going to give me that $2 million. And she said, okay. I said, I'm going to take that $2 million and I'm going to put it into a company we own called Purpose Driven Creators. That's the online influencers and the creators that we have our own agency. They're going to take that $2 million, and we have some really big creators there, and they have a formula that they can do 10 to 1. So they're going to take that 2 million and they're going to turn that, with the campaigns and everything, into feeding 200,000 children. So in the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to take your $2 million and we're going to be feeding 200,000 children. So she said, wow, that's fantastic. I said, yeah, but what about you, right? She said, well, yeah, like, what about me? I said, you sound like a 20-year-old. But anyway, let me tell you about you. I'm now going to take $2.50 off of every person, every child fed, and I'm going to give that back to you. And so she was a numbers lady right away. She says, that's 500,000 a month. That's 6 million a year. I said, yeah, pretty cool, eh? She said, you're turning $2 million into 6 million a year? I said, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. She said, no, there's something wrong here. I said, we're just having a conversation. You called me. I'm going to send you all this stuff. Call me back. The next day she called me back. She said, I can't believe this. This is unbelievable. You've just solved all my problems, and I want to do this. Well, how do we start? So we're implementing that program for her right away. So yeah, that's what we can do to any cause. Anybody says, look, I can raise some money, but like, what do I do with it? It's going to be gone. I'm going to have to be, we're going to eliminate that. And our model has now been, actually, it was her. She said, you just created the sustainability of giving.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that's exactly what we've done. Thank you
Wow,
very
you have
much.
to trademark that
Yeah,
sustainability of
I'm doing it. It's straight. I am doing exactly that. So that now we can do it with anybody. We've got actually, after that, a couple of nonprofits came to us and said, can you do something for us on a smaller level? We said, absolutely. Give it. Let's get investors to invest 250,000, feed 25,000. I'm going to be giving you back 62,500 every month. Can you run your nonprofit on that? And the interesting thing about the one lady, I'm just doing it with her right now, she said, that covers all of our costs and more. I said, then make sure you get on your website and say that everybody who donates to you, 100% goes back to the cause, because you've got everything covered now through this model.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, oh my goodness, yeah, I can do that. I said, you can legal. And if they ask you how, tell them how you're doing it. So yeah. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
It's awesome. Brother, I'm very conscious of your time. Thank you so much for being in the show. One last question.
Yeah.
If you had access to a billboard in the busiest highway on earth, what would you write in it?
It's an interesting question. It's almost like that question that I always get asked, what do you want on your tombstone? Which I hate that question, by the way, but all of my mentors seem to want to ask me that question, which I always answer. I want to make a difference in the world. On the billboard, I think I would try to appeal to as many people as possible, and a message along the lines like, focus on what's important and understand that it's never about what happens to us in life, but how do we react to it? So react positively. That would be the billboard.
Beautiful. That's our power. Our God-given power is to be able to rationalize what's happening outside of us,
Yes, absolutely.
right?
Exactly.
It's
100%,
the
my friend.
superpower that we have. So
Yes,
we
we
choose
do.
to create our own reality based on how we interpret what's going on outside.
100%. Absolutely.
Stephen, brother, thank you so much. If people want to find you, if they want to start collaborating with you in changing the world for a better place, how do they find you online?
Best way, I mean, LinkedIn is where I'm on the most, and I'm there. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, but my email, people can always email me. The best one to do is actually my business email, which is just sclarke, CLARKE at rtggroupinc.com. They can contact me there, and love to talk to anybody. Anybody needs help, reach out. I obviously get inundated with time, but I think that that's one of the things that we can always do, and take time to help other people.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Steve, brother, thank you so much. My heart is wide open, and I'm just in awe
Thank
of
you.
your existence. And thank you. And
I appreciate it.
God bless, and have a wonderful rest of the week.
I shall do that, my friend. You too. Thanks for taking the time.
That's all for today's episode of the Break Free Podcast. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Starting your own business can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Visit davidmansilla.com to pick up a copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Breaking Out of Corporate Jail. Expand what you consider to be possible and reach your full potential. And join us on the next episode.